At 11:30 this morning, my co-host, the indomitable Bob Schlehuber, calls me and he says, Jamal, I say, yeah. He says, have you heard? I said, heard what, Bob? I was writing my script. And he said, I hate to tell you this. Are you sitting down? Yes, I'm sitting down, Bob. What's going on? What's going on? No one has talked. No, Bob. Nobody has talked to me. Just tell me what's going on. Dude, I hate to break this. I hate to be the one to break this news to you. I hate to be the one to have to tell you this. But Bernie Sanders has dropped out the race. And there was a moment of silence. And he says, you okay? I said, I'm okay, Bob. I said, I'm angry. I said, this is so sad. I'm angry. It hurts. And we eventually called Michelle. We told her. And she says, oh, this is so sad. This is so sad. Now, Michelle, Pisces, Scorp. She experienced this more in the wet way. I experienced this more in the anger way, if I'm being honest. 12:45. This comes out. Let's see if I can find it right here.
Good morning, and thank you very much for joining me. I want to express to each of you my deep gratitude for helping to create an unprecedented grassroots political campaign that has had a profound impact in changing our nation. I want to thank the hundreds of thousands of volunteers who knocked on doors, millions of them, in the freezing winters of Iowa and New Hampshire, and in the heat of Nevada and in South Carolina, and in states throughout the country. I want to thank the 2 million Americans who have contributed financially to our campaign and showed the world that we can take on a corrupt campaign finance system and run a major presidential campaign without being dependent upon the wealthy and the powerful. Thank you for your 10 million contributions, averaging $18.50 a donation. I want to thank those who phone banked for our campaign and those of you who sent out millions of texts. And I want to thank the many hundreds of thousands of Americans who attended our rallies, town meetings, and house parties from New York to California. Some of these events had over 25,000 people, some had a few hundred, and some had a dozen, but all were important. And let me thank those who made these many events possible. I also want to thank our surrogates, too many to name. I can't imagine that any candidate has ever been blessed with a stronger and more dedicated group of people who have taken our message to every part of this country. And I want to thank all of those who made the music and the art an integral part of our campaign. I want to thank all of you who spoke to your friends and neighbors, posted on social media, and worked as hard as you could to make this a better country. Together, we have transformed American consciousness as to what kind of nation we can become.
It's a lot of people to thank. He talked about surrogates. I would like to name two. Nina Turner, Zephyrin Teachout, David Sirota. I have done a show for 3 years at this point. And because I've done a show at 3 years at this point, I have a certain feeling of this particular domain where I consider it to be mine. This is mine. That's the way I perceive it. So whether I'm on a radio show in Chesterfield or whether I'm doing my radio show in Sputnik, that's the way I take on it. I take it on as I'm effectively the person who is in the spotlight, and I'm going to own that spotlight, whether I'm a guest or whether it's my show, but particularly when it's my show. In dealing with other people, like having Bob as a co-host and Michelle as a producer, they have a tendency to blunt my worst edges. Meaning I have a tendency towards embellishment. I have a tendency towards doing too many clips. I have a tendency towards sometimes over-explaining myself. And they'll be the ones, particularly Michelle, be like, hey, are you sure you need that? Now, sometimes that can be annoying. By the same token, if I'm being brutally honest, I probably wouldn't tell her this. Most of the time, she's right. Now, Sanders needs to learn that. Meaning, you need to learn when something that you're doing or your own bias and your own proclivities get in the way of you doing something better than what you're doing. He has people in his camp, surrogates, who, whatever his own biases are, whatever his own preconceptions of the world, whatever his own ideological guardrails, those people are different in the way they go about politics. Let Nina Turner, let David Sirota, let Zephyr Teachout be who they are in pursuing their case to try to get you elected. You didn't do that. You put a knife in Nina Turner, you put a knife in Zephyr Teachout, and in one case you hit David Sirota on the knuckles. You should not have done that. There are times where I may get annoyed because somebody is pushing back on me, and I consider, again, my domain, you're intruding upon my domain. But by the same token, it's not my domain in its entirety. And again, when you're interacting with other people, sometimes one of the best things is allowing their biases and proclivities, which may make your own biases and proclivities, even though it rubs up against it, better. I'm saying the same thing is true for Sanders. Whatever his proclivities politically, you have people in your camp that have different ideas on these things. And you must be able to, as a candidate, realize when your thoughts on this are wrong for the space to which you're operating in, and theirs might be a bit better. You didn't do that. You put a knife in Nina Turner when she said Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden portrayed black people, and you had the pivot point where you could have said Social Security, Medicare. You could have even made the argument about the criminal justice program. You could have even made the argument about the line about civil rights and getting angry about it. Yes, you have the capability of getting angry and indignant about it, considering you walk with King and he's lying about being a part of the movement. You didn't do any of that stuff. Nina Turner gave you the pivot point for it. And at the debate, you had a platform to make your case. You didn't do any of that. In the secondary case, Zephyr Teachout making the argument about Joe Biden being corrupt. Again, for all that you rail about the billionaire class and the oligarchs and all of these people who are buying America and fucking America over and all of the big existential issues and all of the problems that avail us, all of these people going bankrupt each year because they don't have access to healthcare, the environment being destroyed, the military running roughshod over the nations, wasting our resources. We're spending upwards of $1 trillion. You're talking about cutting the military budget. You're talking about getting rid of student debt because these things are on people's backs. And what is the effect of debt? That feeling. What does it feel like to have hundreds or tens of thousands of dollars of debt on your back? This thing that's not even real and yet feels real in the way that it weighs on a particular individual. It's insane that we allow this in our society, but here we are. But you're the guy. You're the guy. You're the cure. You're the FDR. All of that pain, all of that anguish, all of that difficulty, you're the guy that's going to do something about it. God damn it, I believe you. And in spite of being the guy that's going to deal with all of that, based on your argument, is because of a billionaire oligarchical class where our society has effectively given over the reins to the top 1%. Meaning we're living in an oligarchy, not a democracy. The top 1% runs the house. I agree with that argument. How does that work in a political space in the sense of democracy? Because these things intersect, right? And you are, in fact, running in a political race, and the person who wins that political race gets to set, to some degree, political decisions. Elections have consequences. It means that the oligarch class that you run against has to have a champion. One, Donald Trump, yes. But who's the champion in the context of the Democratic Party for that class? Because both are captured. You wouldn't have to run against the Democratic establishment if it wasn't captured, because they would actually be agreeing with you on these policies. And yet, you could never tie Joe Biden to the oligarchical class, to that Democratic and Republican establishment that has fucked over the American public for the last 40, 50 years. You just couldn't bring yourself to do it. You could have did it. All of the ammo was there to do it. But you couldn't do it. And so when Zephyr Teachout made the argument for you setting up the pivot point, Joe Biden is corrupt, you put a knife in your surrogate, hitting her on the knuckles. Let your surrogates be themselves in pursuit of pushing your particular agenda and opinion. No one else is going to apologize for saying something bad to you. They've called us racist, sexist, bros. They've pretended as if people of color didn't exist in your campaign entirely for the sake of just saying white men are backing Bernie Sanders, despite the fact that Sanders was getting more support from people of color. It was utterly astonishing. There was no apologies for that. And that was coming on mainstream media day after day after day after day after day. It got to the point where one of the times the person made the point that if you're backing Sanders, you are almost by definition sexist because Elizabeth Warren is just Bernie Sanders with a vagina and she has better policies. This was the stuff they were saying about us, not even just you, us. They could not figure out how to hit you, so they turned around and hit us, and they did it over and over and over and over and over. And when it got to the last point for the last, 3 months, that's all they talked about, including Elizabeth Warren, the person who grifted for votes and for support from that very part of the political distribution. At some point, she realized she wasn't going to get it. She says, fuck it. And she says, those people are uniquely bad. And those snake emojis, I fucking hate them because of those snake emojis. She gets out the race, and the person who she supposedly, ideologically is against, Joe Biden, at least that's what she told her supporters for the last 8 months or whatever, says the most nice, flattering things about him being a good man, but not so much about Sanders, the person who, again, she grifted votes and support from. Bernie Sanders has dropped out of the race. Welcome to the Soapbox.
Immediately, right now, we have got to defeat Donald Trump. And we have got to elect Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine.
That's what's coming. That's what's coming. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Soapbox. Like, share. You can always support. PayPal, Patreon. Far from what some people may be saying about me on Twitter or on YouTube, the show is not on suicide watch. I'm okay. Simmering with rage, but that rage hasn't necessarily gone anywhere. That's been there for the last month or so. You can hear it probably in my videos when it goes too long for like 5 minutes because I am just bitching about something that I haven't necessarily picked apart yet in regards to the thing that's digging in me about it. But my feelings for this race are all over the place. It's so bizarre. I often say pot helps my heart center in regards to me feeling stuff a bit more than I typically experience the stuff through my head. But that's not necessarily helping me kind of work through this. It's a certain degree of, I love the guy, but by the same token, I'm angry at the guy. And part of my anger is because of the way I process the world versus the way he processes the world. And, you know, before people start screaming, sheepdog, 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 keep in mind, the reason that many of these people love Bernie Sanders is because Bernie Sanders will go to Congress and the same thing that he is telling you he would effectively do in Congress. Despite all of the economic incentives for him to not behave that way, he had an ideological center and an ideological base that was rigid and stern, that was able to hold his shape in that particular situation, which is why we trusted him. He was authentic. By the same token, that ideological rigidness that he uses in Congress is the exact same ideological rigidness in which the way he ran this race. Meaning it's not a bug, it's a feature. It's just who he is. It's not that he is intentionally sheepdogging. He's just an ideological actor that has an inability to deviate from his ideology based on the environment to which he's in. In one situation, meaning in the context of being in office, if he was president, that would be a great attribute. In the context of running a race, it is a fatal, fatal flaw. If you're going to do an autopsy of Sanders, start there. Don't start at the cheating. Don't start at the opposition against them. All of that was baked into the cake for anybody who's trying to go after the establishment. I understand that they did cheat him in the sense of those races, like in Iowa and everything else. I understand that the Democratic Party lined up against him. I understand that media smeared him day after day and smeared us day after day. I get it all. But Donald Trump won, which means that it's not impossible to win under those circumstances. It's something that you just have to overcome. Life has obstacles. Life has difficulties. The guy has no leg, climbs Mount Everest. Why? He had a challenge. It was difficult, yes, but he had something that he wanted to accomplish, and he didn't necessarily let the injury or the defect stop him from that challenge. That's life. Everybody has their challenges. Everybody has the difficulties. Anybody that wants to do anything of substance is something that they have to figure out how to work themselves through. This was no different. It was understood going into this contest. How could you not take that point of view going into this contest? None of these people were your friends. All of these people were sharks. Everybody in this race had a box cutter. Michael Bloomberg snuck a gun into the debate hall. I'm just making the very basic point that it was understood and known that they were going to be against him, which is why I don't put that as my first item when I'm criticizing this. I go to the candidate in regards to what could the candidate have done differently in this process? What was the candidate expected to do that the candidate didn't do? That's the way I function with this, because that's the way I function with myself. How did I fuck up? What did I do wrong? Before looking at this kind of other stuff. So I'm not picking on Sanders on this one. I function in the same way that I function towards Guy. Sanders gives this heartfelt dropout speech.
Few would deny that over the course of the past 5 years, our movement has won the ideological struggle. In so-called red states and blue states and purple states, a majority of the American people now understand that we must raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, that we must guarantee health care as a right to all of our people, that we must transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, and that higher education must be available to all, regardless of income. It was not long ago that people considered these ideas radical and fringe. Today, they are mainstream ideas, and many of them are already being implemented in cities and states across the country. That is what we have accomplished together. In terms of healthcare, even before this horrific pandemic we are now experiencing, more and more Americans understood that we must move to a Medicare for All single-payer program. During the primary elections, exit polls showed in state after state a strong majority of Democratic primary voters supported a single government health insurance program to replace private insurance. That was true even in states where our campaign did not prevail. And let me just say this. In terms of healthcare, this current horrific crisis that we are now in has exposed for all to see how absurd our current employer-based I could give you better news, but I think you know the truth. Which takes me to the state of our presidential campaign. I wish I could give you better news, but I think you know the truth. And that is that we are now some 300 delegates behind Vice President Biden, and the path toward victory is virtually impossible. So while we are winning the ideological battle, and while we are winning the support of so many young people and working people throughout the country, I have concluded that this battle for the Democratic nomination will not be successful. And so today, I am announcing the suspension of my campaign. Please know that I do not make this decision lightly. In fact, it has been a very difficult and painful decision. Over the past few weeks, Jane and I, in consultation with top staff and many of our prominent supporters, have made an honest assessment of the prospects for victory. If I believed we had a feasible path to the nomination, I would certainly continue the campaign. But it's just not there. I know that there may be some in our movement who disagree with this decision, who would like us to fight on to the last ballot cast at the Democratic Convention. I understand that position. But as I see the crisis gripping the nation, exacerbated by a president unwilling or unable to provide any kind of credible leadership, and the work that needs to be done to protect people in this most desperate hour, I cannot, in good conscience, continue to mount a campaign that cannot win and which would interfere with the important work required of all of us in this difficult hour. But let me say this very emphatically. As you all know, we have never been just a campaign. We are a grassroots, multiracial, multi-generational movement which has always believed that real change never comes from the top on down, but always from the bottom on up. We have taken on Wall Street, the insurance companies, the drug companies, the fossil fuel industry, the military-industrial complex, the prison industrial complex, and the greed of the entire corporate elite. That struggle continues. While this campaign is coming to an end, our movement is not. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us that, quote, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice, end quote. The fight for justice is what our campaign has been about. The fight for justice is what our movement remains about. Today, I congratulate Joe Biden, a very decent man, who I will work with to move our progressive ideas forward. On a practical note, let me also say this. I will stay on the ballot in all remaining states and continue to gather delegates. While Vice President Biden will be the nominee, we must continue working to assemble as many delegates as possible at the Democratic Convention, where we will be able to exert significant influence over the party platform and other functions. Then together, standing united, we will go forward to defeat Donald Trump, the most dangerous president in modern American history. And we will fight to elect strong progressives at every level of government, from Congress to the school board. As I hope all of you know, this race has never been about me. I ran for the presidency because I believe that as a president, I could accelerate and institutionalize the progressive changes that we are all building together. And if we keep organizing and fighting, I have no doubt but that is exactly what will happen. While the path may be slower now, we will change this nation, and with like-minded friends around the globe, change the entire world. On a very personal note, speaking for Jane, myself, and our entire family, we will always carry in our hearts the memory of the extraordinary people we have met across this country. We often hear about the beauty of America, and this country is incredibly beautiful. But to me, the beauty I will remember most is in the faces of the people we have met from one corner of this nation to the other. The compassion, love, and decency I have seen in them makes me so hopeful for our future. It also makes me more determined than ever to work to create a nation that reflects those values and lifts up all of our people. Please stay in this fight with me. Let us go forward together. The struggle continues. Thank you all very much.
Sanders out the race. A few comments. I know all of you are not going to agree with what I'm going to say. And I am going to open the phone lines. So if you don't, you can try to take the piss out of me. This is the day that I am absolutely open and willing to have this kind of come at me bro type stuff. So let's talk. But let me make my comment first before opening the phone lines. One, the platform doesn't mean anything. It's worthless. It just is. It doesn't matter. And the second point, do not be us. Be honest. Be very honest. What was your expectation of Sanders in this race? And did your expectation go to the point that all of these big issues that he was pushing, all of these crisis and pain that individuals were experiencing, was your perspective that that level of anguish and pain that a man is enduring, he's enduring the pain of the world, that would inspire and incentivize him to run that race with a certain ruthless devotion that everything else is subordinate. Now, of all the things that you would think would be subordinate to that, you find out that he's buddies with Biden. And because he's buddies with Biden, he can never really go after Biden in the way that that a typical campaign will go after a typical opponent. And so when Biden lies about civil rights, Sanders doesn't bring it up. When Biden lies about Social Security, he does bring that one up. And if you notice, when he did lie about it, Biden dropped in New Hampshire and Iowa because those people realized this guy's a flagrant liar. I'm making the point that showing somebody lying has a certain potency to it. But Sanders never wanted to venture into the area of the black vote. Sanders ends up losing the black vote 3-1 or about a 3/4 or something. But I'm making a very basic point that if the way he ended up running that race, especially in the context of African Americans, and he ends up losing by that much, you can't go wrong trying something else. Meaning there's no way to lose it worse. So my argument that I've been making for the longest time is that you have to fight for that particular section of the electorate. And you have to do so brazenly, unabashedly, as if I deserve to be able to make this argument. And he doesn't. And have a certain level of indignity about it, because you deserve to have a certain level of indignity. You marched with King. You were dragged away, chained up to a black woman in the civil rights movement. You had your stripes. Most people have never been dragged away in regards to the civil rights movement. And you, Bernie Sanders, is one of them. This other grifter over here is pretending that he was. So you should, just by definition of any campaign, any random campaign will do this, show that that person is lying. He doesn't do it. So when I make the point that, it's like all of these issues, and you find out in BuzzFeed and New York Times, well, they were friends, so he didn't want to do that stuff. He wanted to stay away from that. That burns me. That burns me. What do you expect of your candidate in the context of a race? And do you expect a candidate to show contrast with the other? Because this does not break any ethical guidelines with regards to Sanders. Sanders was just squeamish about doing it. Meaning, in the way that Sanders wants to run a race where he wants to be honest, it is an honest portrayal to say this guy's lying. And put that up for the African American community to make their choice on whether or not they want to stay with Biden. Your job is to do that. Because that's the way you win. And when people are sending you, $250 million, they expect that. I just think that that's like the bare minimum expected of a campaign. I don't care if you're his buddy. As a candidate, he should expect you to use all the powers at your disposal to win that. Because it's the presidency. And like you say, your ability to accelerate progressive change. And what does progressive change mean? Getting rid of the debt that's on people's backs, ensuring that those people can get health care. We're in the middle of a pandemic, ensuring those people can get health care when they need health care, ensuring those people can go to school. Those are magnificent things. A Green New Deal. You could have had all of those things. You could have done all of those things if you would have had the ability to really believe in not me, us. Meaning, what I want to get accomplished goes beyond my own proclivities in regards to how we're running a particular campaign, and my own biases, and my own even friendships with Joe Biden. Because it matters more. Not me, us, right? It's not about me, it's not about my friendships. It's about all of this other stuff. As for, we took on everybody. We took on the billionaire class. We took on the Democratic establishment. We took on, the pharmaceutical companies. No, you didn't. Just stop. Just stop. You didn't. I'm sorry. I've come to the conclusion, no, you didn't. If you'd have won, yes, but you didn't win. It's true that you were able to browbeat Amazon to raise wages. I'm not taking that away. Look, everything that I say here is prefaced with a given that Sanders has done amazing things in dragging the Overton window of conversation to the left, changing the hegemonic norm of lefty politics, but also making it clear to lefties that your particular policies and the things that you want are indeed popular, which goes against 50 years of the Democratic Party telling people that they weren't. So I'm not taking anything away from Sanders from this. This is, I guess, to some degree, an autopsy. And, things that I've been saying for the past year or two, nobody listens to me. But it was the same thing with Jeremy Corbyn. If you're not, it's just being honest. And it's not so much that I like doing this. This is not, dancing on the man's grave. Clearly, I'm a Sanders supporter. But, the left has to be honest about its defects. And I don't understand why weakness is so endemic to the left. For the life of me, I just don't. I don't know if it's because it's empathy. Like the thing that's in you that is empathetic towards other people that makes you want to do these policies. It's the same thing that creates this kind of ethical guidelines where these people think their ethics are almost like real things. In which case, they act a particular way when they're in a political space, whether that's Jeremy Corbyn or whether that's Bernie Sanders. These people need a Batman. They need a Section 31. They need something else. It's like they can't be allowed to run their campaign in their entirety by themselves. It is a utter and entire weakness. You didn't take them on. Let's be honest. What does it mean to take something on? Let's start there. You have a political campaign, great. And in that political campaign, you want to raise wages, you want to get rid of student debt, you want to do all that stuff. Great, no issue. Corporations don't run for political offices, just as a flat fact. If corporations are not running for political offices, and if indeed you're making an argument that the 1% has effectively bought Washington, that both classes are effectively corporate captured, fair enough, I agree. Then how are they influencing our political space, Sanders? Explain that to me. If indeed your argument is that they are dumping massive amounts of money into the political space in order to influence the political space, you also point out the number of billionaires that Pete Buttigieg has and the number of billionaires that Joe Biden has. Why? You're pointing them out because you're making the point that they're bought, that effectively the money that they get influences their political behavior, their political opinions, the areas to which they lean, the things to which they choose as opposed to things to which they don't. Not to mention the ideology that's already baked into the cake in the process that gives them already somewhat of a precondition to looking in a particular direction. But if indeed you're right, then you've basically said that Joe Biden is effectively bought. The Democratic Party, the front runner of the Democratic Party, is effectively bought. Bloomberg got into the race only to stop Sanders. Bloomberg got out of the race when it was very clear that Joe Biden at that point had gotten ahead. Elizabeth Warren wrapped Sanders up, splitting the vote, allowing Joe Biden to get a killing blow, leaving Super Tuesday with 3 or 4 more states than he would have gotten otherwise. At that point, Bloomberg said, fair enough, I don't have to be here. Why didn't he have to be here? Because Joe Biden is, if he wins it, Joe Biden is going to win it. Well, at that point, I'm good. He's probably going to give me a tax cut. Nothing is going to fundamentally change. Joe Biden has already said that. I'm good. My point is, Joe Biden is the billionaire candidate. Joe Biden is the candidate of oligarchs. He's the candidate of the corporations. He is the front man. He is the guy with the hand of the oligarchical class in his ass, making him move one way or the other. But you can never tie him to that. You can never make the argument that Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, and the Republican Party are effectively bought. They are all bought. I am running in this race because I am sick of these people being bought. I am the only one who is unbought by that particular class. And show how. Show the policies. Be specific about the policies that shows that these guys are bought. Yes, the Iraq War is won, but the Iraq War is not going to win you any votes. This is a domestic election at this point. And when you're getting into this of Social Security and everything else, you should have made that. They couldn't even get him to attack on that. It was only when Joe Biden made his that Sanders said something in return. But that's kind of my point. The attacks on Social Security worked. The attacks on civil rights would have also worked. The attacks even that was taking place in regards to Joe Biden and the crime bill and all this other stuff, all of these attacks would have worked. Joe Biden has been in politics for God knows how long. He's said all sorts of stuff. The black people can't take care of their kids. That would have worked. Like I'm saying, all of these things have legs. Joe Biden is the billionaire candidate. And if you can't go after Joe Biden, who is the billionaire candidate and the candidate of the oil and gas and pharmaceutical, he's their guy. If you can't do that, then you can't say you took them on. That's my only basic point. When you find out that BuzzFeed said they are buddies, and so Sanders can never really gin up any level of animosity, and you don't even have to have animosity. It's like I'm playing a game of chess. I can put a knife in my opponent with a smile on my face. Why? Because we understand the game space that we're in. I don't expect any quarter. He's not going to give it to me. Same thing. Apply. We know what we got into when we enter this game space. The political space is no different. To find out that they're buddies. Oh, man. Oh, that hurts. Like I said, it feels like an incomplete election. It feels like everyone else in that race understood what was up. Stop him. And the guy who all of these people wanted to stop, he said, I'm going to run this race with a songbook. And I'm going to say speech after speech after speech. And just through my oratory ability and force of will alone, people are going to flock to me. And he got millions. But he never realized that it's like a principal man being in an election that didn't prize that or didn't respect that level of principal behavior. He never realized that the environment to which he found himself didn't respect that level of politics, at least exclusively. You could give this rhetorical politics, meaning think back to Obama. Obama ran an insurgent campaign. And in running that insurgent campaign, he did two things. He gave oratory behavior, but he also turned around and put a knife in his opponent. And he had no issue with putting a knife in Hillary Clinton and hit Hillary Clinton over and over and over and over. And at that particular point, keep in mind, Hillary Clinton was the one that was supposed to be the inevitable candidate. That was the person who African Americans were backing. That was the person who everybody at that point assumed was going to win the race. He ran that race with the notion that this is my race for me to win. And whatever I need to do to win is subordinate to everything else. I am not in this race to make friends with Hillary Clinton. I am in this race to be president of the United States. I knew going back when I was an infant, I was going to be president of the United States. So that's what I'm going to do. And that's why he ran the race. And people might have bellyached. People might have said, oh, poor, that's poor behavior hitting her in this particular way. Obama didn't care one iota. Why? Because his objective was to be president of the United States. And his audience that he was catering to was not necessarily the media, even though the media loved him because he was, first black candidate. But his audience was out there. So he knew that he needed to make sure that the people who he couldn't get just through rhetoric alone, because people might not have believed the hope of change stuff, he had to get through other means. The other means.
It's what's wrong with politics today. Hillary Clinton will say anything to get elected. Now she's making false attacks on Barack Obama. The Washington Post says Clinton isn't telling the truth. She championed NAFTA, even though it has cost South Carolina thousands of jobs. And worst of all, it was Hillary Clinton who voted for George Bush's war in Iraq. Hillary Clinton, she'll say anything and change nothing.
Hillary Clinton, she'll say anything, she'll change nothing. Ignore the Sputnik thing, it has nothing to do with Sputnik. That's an ad that Obama ran, basically saying that woman is a liar. That woman's a liar. Joe Biden lied about civil rights, lied about being locked up in South Africa, lied about Mandela saying hi to him or whatever he said, lied about the Iraq War, lied about Social Security. Joe Biden has done a cornucopia of lies. You think if Bernie Sanders ever called him a liar? Nope. Did he betray African Americans? Yes. The crime bill is a betrayal. And not just the crime bill, the civil rights legislation pushing back against busing and arguing states' rights. Kamala Harris, when she got Biden to argue states' rights, that should have been a video in and of itself. This is kind of my point. You have to fight for all of that stuff. And he was willing to fight for none of that stuff, including electability. If I'm sitting in the room with Sanders and we're having a conversation about politics of trying to get him elected, not getting an organization, just raw politics. And I'm telling him a few things. I'm telling him, look, Joe Biden, because of his association with Obama and because he's the normal creature of the Democratic Party, you have to somehow get people, particularly African Americans or older African Americans, to come your way. Meaning they believe that he's more electable because he's considered to be normal. Also, you have an issue with the black vote because they, again, are creatures of the Democratic Party. Joe Biden considers to be normal, and he associates and robes himself in Obama. They want the Obama legacy to continue. All right, Sanders looks at me. How do I pry them away from Joe Biden? I say, first, you attack Joe Biden relentlessly on electability. And your argument on electability is, yes, I am the radical, but think about what won in the last election. It was the radical that won. Al Gore lost. John Kerry lost. Hillary Clinton lost. But Joe Biden is just the same creature that lost. That's not what the public is looking for. He is unelectable. And your mantra becomes he is unelectable over and over and over and over again. And you keep pointing to Hillary Clinton, how she lost over and over and over again. The media would ballyhoo, all of these people would be belly aching, but the public would understand the logic of it at some point. It may sink in, as opposed to running the race where you're considered the risk and you don't necessarily bring up the fact that, well, no, I'm not the risk. Meaning you have to deal with that. You can't ignore the fact that the public is looking at Joe Biden as more electable, and you have to start early attacking him on that. Joe Biden is cognitively challenged. And the more you attack him on this notion of electability, the public sees all of those gaffes add up. This is exactly what Obama did to Romney. This is my point in regards to playbook stuff. Obama went after Romney early. Obama dumped a bunch of money. Go look back at the 2012 election. Obama dumped a bunch of money into the early states that he needed, the swing states. The Republican Party is looking like, oh, Romney is doing so great. Romney is doing so great. The catch is the election was going to be won in those swing states. And what did Obama do? This guy is part of Bain. This guy's a vulture capitalist. This guy is selling your stores. This creepy music, the music what you're going after, it's like that. This Romney came and took this plant down and made these guys build a plant. And then Romney got on the plant and they fired everybody and they got off the plant and made the workers give her. Like it was these scary videos that he was playing in these particular areas, and it worked. Meaning everything that came out about Romney at that point was cast within the context that was made by Obama in those hit videos, that this guy is effectively a vulture capitalist that will step over a homeless man to get into his limo. It worked. Anything that happened after that Romney said and did, that in any way fit into that context, that was the way that people looked at him. Joe Biden's electability should have been challenged in the exact same way early on if that was going to be an issue in regards to you and how the audience is perceiving you. Yes, I'm the radical, but that's what you need to get elected. That guy who has no enthusiasm is not going to get elected. Hillary Clinton had no enthusiasm. She didn't get elected. Hillary Clinton hits you all the time. You shouldn't give a shit about hitting Hillary Clinton in this way. I don't care what the public says. The public hates her. And so it doesn't hurt you one iota to make the point, that's a true point, that, look, I understand that you think he's electable, but that's just a sense of relative normality. The reality of it is, the people who you consider to be electable lost. And yeah, you're challenging the assumptions of the public, but you need to challenge those assumptions of the public because the public considers Joe Biden to be more electable. You need to make sure they realize that's not so. That's the way I would have tried to argue to challenge that very specific point. On the black vote, you've heard me say this more than once, so I don't have to say it anymore. The notion that you fight hard for that vote and you challenge the lies that Joe Biden says in regards to civil rights, you will peel away African Americans from Joe Biden in doing so. I promise you, you would have peeled away African American support. There's nothing worse than tokenizing something sacred for own political expedience. And the moment that you reveal that, and you reveal that in South Carolina, Georgia, you reveal that in those southern states, starting before you even get into the South again, washing it with Joe Biden going to those churches and lying in that way and showing him as a fraud, that would have gotten you more votes. That would have pulled away percentages of support from Joe Biden. Even if it didn't go to you, it didn't matter. The fact that it wasn't going to Joe Biden was the point. You didn't do that. Look, I guess my point is basically there were opportunities, there were chances, there was political movements that could have been made. South Carolina was one of those states that all effort, this is what I mean when I say the civil rights stuff. It plays in the South Carolina because that was where you got the momentum shift from from Sanders to Biden. Cutting into that vote in the South Carolina makes a different narrative going forward out of South Carolina. And if you could have beat Biden in South Carolina, that would have been a difference. Going after Biden on his lying in South Carolina and the same way you went after him for his lying in Social Security would have been something that would have been beneficial. Like, there were opportunities in this race, but the candidate just didn't want to take those opportunities. All right, I'm going to go to the audience. So I'm going to let you guys call in because this is somewhat of a difficult day, not just for me, but I know for all of you, and let's share our pain with one another. Come on. My computer's freezing. Give me 1 second, guys. All right, here we are. Jomosino 79, time to focus on Mike Gravel's solution from here out, direct democracy, people's legislature. That's interesting. I want to talk about that for a moment. Philip Church, the majority of American people are on these issues now, but not politicians, and not politicians ever if we protect them from the obligation of representing us with vote blue no matter who. Philip Church, yes. 1,000% yes. Agreed. Frank Frio, the issue I worry now is it's climate change. Any policy like the Green New Deal has just been pushed back to 2025. It's eliminated. It's not even on the agenda at this point. Dillial 357. Biden's lies are what caused him to drop out of the previous runs for president. They just needed to be highlighted. Right there. That's my point. Like my aggravation with Sanders is, think of it this way. If somebody broke into my house, I have a shotgun. I load that shotgun and go down to confront whoever it is because I have a wife upstairs and I have 2 dogs and I want all of them to be safe. And the fact that you broke into my house, you matter less than all of them. You forfeit your life. Just being honest. And the person exposes themselves and shows themselves to be hostile. Maybe they're carrying a weapon or something like that. I put a bullet in them. Now, under normal circumstances, I can't do that. I can't shoot somebody because they bumped my car. But if you are in my house, you're threatening me, my life is at stake, yes, I'm putting you down. I have no ill feelings, no conscience about that at all, if I am being bluntly honest with you. But you can't do that if they bump your car. The situation itself has a sense of urgency to it just because of what's at stake. You would think that in an environment, a political environment, where the left hasn't won in 50, 60 years, where there hasn't been a viable candidate for the left in 50, 60 years, that Sanders is not going to be able to run for president again, ever. And that all of these big existential issues that he talks about, all of the stuff is on the line. you would think that because all of those items are so big, because the moment in time is a once in a lifetime opportunity, where there were 50 years that came before you, we have no idea what's going to come after you, that this is your moment. And because of all of that's on the line, because everything that's focused on that particular thing, that the candidate who's the focal point of that would be like, everything else is subordinate to me getting elected. That's what you would think just because of what's at stake. And that's not the way he was processing this. And I don't understand why, for the life of me. Like, it blows me away. Like, that your ideology can be so strong, like so adamant, so persistent, that you say, I understand that all of this stuff is at stake. I understand that all of this pain and anguish is in the United States. But I can't bring myself to hit Joe Biden on these issues where he's lied about. Like, that's like that floors me. You have no idea how much that floors me. And I just can't wrap my head around the consciousness that would say something like that. And yet, this is where we are. And now, he's going to be out there shucking and jiving, telling people to go vote Joe Biden, just like he was doing for Clinton. And he gets nothing out of this process. I have no idea what happens to the left after this. It's missed opportunity. Like, it's all sorts of shit that's wrapped into it. Missed opportunity, missed potential, the potential for something great that was just not necessarily founded. It's just a lot of stuff that's wrapped up into this. Dilly, y'all, you're right. He should have said something. Gaff 29, you people don't deserve Bernie. Ingrates. Okay, I'm an ingrate. You can be belligerent towards me. Like I said, I know a lot of people wasn't going to agree. But what have I said that's wrong? Be honest. What have I said that's wrong? Be explicit. Tell me. What explicitly have I said that you disagree with? It's not, and again, like I said in the beginning, I grant Sanders all of the stuff that he's done. I take nothing away from him. But let's have an honest autopsy in regards to Sanders. That's all I'm asking for. Because the next lefty that come up needs to have this bit of information in running a race in order to understand how to win that race. Because this isn't it. This was not a way to win a race. This doesn't even feel like a race. Like, at the time it did, but in retrospect it doesn't. Just because of the way he ran the race, ultimately, with the notion that this guy's my buddy, so I can't necessarily go after the guy. It's an ideological choice. I get it. And I get ideologically is why we love Sanders. I get that too. I get it. It's not a bug. It's a feature. It's who he is. It's why we love him in a political space. But in running a political campaign, an inability to run an attack at, it's like I don't have the ability to use my knights. Why? I don't like knights. I don't like the way they move in the board. So I'm just going to leave those off and just use bishops. And you're like, what? Why are you doing that? It's like it's this ideological box. I don't understand it. Gabriel DeMarc Filler. What did Bernie support? Massive bailout for corporations. What about Corona bonds? Now, I don't know what Corona bonds are. All right, I'm going to open the phone lines. I don't do this often, but I am going to open the phone lines for you guys to call in on the show. Now, let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna open the phone lines for you guys to call in. The number is there. Hold on. I think this opened. There we go. All right. So the phone lines are open. I'm going to show you another piece. Uh-oh, we have a phone call right now. Hello, who am I speaking to?
This is John, man.
What's going on, John?
AKA Kills for a Living.
How's it going?
Yeah. All right. I'm just going to try to keep it simple and short so everybody else can get in. But I'm losing my train of thought. But simply, man, I told you, man. Like, I don't understand why people.
Oh, God damn it! Call back, man. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Hello, who's on the line?
Hi, my name is Robert.
What's going on, Robert? So what's going on? We're talking about Sanders today. He dropped out. What are your feelings? What are you thinking?
I think his speech that you just played a little while ago was perfect. It was a perfect example of everything he did wrong and everything weak about him. And I had read it as like he basically admitted that his entire campaign was pretty much just a publicity stunt for promoting his policies. And I don't remember now what word he said, but you go back and listen to it. I think you would agree with it when you hear it. But I think that's about it. I mean, everything about that speech was just the perfect example of everything he did wrong all along.
Yeah, I mean, I have feelings about it too. Thank you for calling, man. I'm gonna bring in the other person on the line.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a good one. So I agree with you. I don't know about everything he did wrong, and I don't know about a publicity stunt. I think he actually did want to win. Like, I don't think it's a situation where it was like he was just running to be running. Hold on, give me 1 second, okay? I'll bring you in a moment. I don't think it was a publicity stunt. I don't think it was a situation where he was running, where he was like, I'm just doing this because I want to showcase my policies. I, honest to God, think he wanted to win. Like, think about if you're playing a chess game for the moment. And as you're playing the game, you're thinking to yourself, all right, I can win it this way, I can win it that way. And in your thinking, you think, I don't have to acquiesce to X or Y. I can, if I pursue this agenda, I'll still end up winning this game. So you might give up a piece, you might ignore certain things that's taking place on the other side of the board, because in your head, I can pursue this particular course of action and win this game. I have my own biases about the things that I like and dislike, and within the context of my biases, I think I can win it. And then you realize, kind of at the last minute, oh shit, that doesn't work. And it's too late to do anything else. I think that's what happened in the campaign. I think it was just this notion, this, dancing on a rainbow, believing that he could somehow win that way. I can give aspirational speeches. I can tell people what I'm going to do for them. I can just make honest to God, rational, pragmatic policy that meets their material interests. And if I give them that policy, and if I show them that, look, this particular pathway will make a better country, a better America, and it'll be better for you, that they will latch on to that out of rational action. And the public says, I agree with all of these policies, but I'm going to vote for Joe Biden because I don't believe you can ever do that, because the Democratic Party has been so incrementalist that the notion of big things is beyond our imagination. Think of how dispiriting that is. Like, you win the argument, policy-wise, and the public still chooses the other guy. Like, it's astonishing. Thanks, man. Okay, who's on the line? I'm sorry. What's going on, man?
Hi, Jamal.
What's the name?
This is Nima. Hi, this is Nima Tsuji. I'm calling from Boston, Massachusetts. I'm a big fan of yours. I think you make smart, incisive points. So I enjoy listening to you just as much as other YouTube pundits like Kyle Kalinske or Jordan Sheraton. I consider you three my top favorites. So I listen to you guys all the time. I just want to say thank you for all your comments. You're very smart.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Just wanted to comment, I guess, on obviously the news of the day that Bernie got out. And obviously, I tend to agree with you. It's disappointing. I didn't think he was going to win the nomination, even if he stayed in. But I was hoping he would stay in, because you never know. Because, maybe something, not that I wanted anything horrible to happen to anyone, but I was hoping, because Biden is definitely not coherent, and he doesn't know what he's saying half the time. So I was hoping maybe Bernie would stay in and something good, at least for Bernie, would happen towards the end. But I guess I think there's stuff that happened behind the scenes that we don't really know, all of it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they forced him to get out or anything like that, but I do think that there was a lot of pressure on him to get out. And I think he succumbed to the pressure and got out. I mean, I don't have all the reasons, but it didn't seem like the dynamics of the race. I think you mentioned it before. The dynamics of the race wasn't really changing a whole lot. recently. So even if he stayed in, I don't think he was going to win most of the primaries that were left. So maybe he made the right decision by getting out, but it's still disappointing because, like you, I'm a huge Bernie fan, and I don't see anyone who's a successor who's going to take the lead. Yeah, I don't either. It's really disappointing.
I honestly don't know what's next. It's like because that's why I started thinking about this in somewhat of a different way. It's like you do have a political campaign, and within the context of that political campaign, you're getting millions of dollars, meaning you have, $250 million, and I understand you spend a lot of that money just for the campaign. But do you, at some point, if your name is Sanders, think to yourself, okay, what's next? Like, if I can't be president, if I can't necessarily, get to office, what's next? What can I get out of this? Like, if nothing else, just like at the end of grim death, what can I claw out of this particular situation?
Right. Yeah.
And go ahead. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I agree. I was just going to say, there's a lot we can say, but I would say, like, generally, I agree with your incisive takes, because you were right about Jeremy Corbyn, for instance, in Great Britain waffling on Brexit. That was the wrong strategy for him.
Oh yeah.
You were right about Elizabeth Warren. You could not trust her. I never trusted her from the beginning, just like you. But I didn't think she would be that horrible as she turned out to be.
Yeah, that's
as far as not being a good ally. She's not even being a good friend.
To some degree, that even blew my mind. The degree to which she went with that. Like, my thought was, she is in this to screw him over. She's a creature of the party, and as a creature of the party, she's working in, it's like, because in my head, you're working with Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton hates Sanders' guts, hates his guts. I can't imagine what those conversations are. The slurs going about Sanders that just slip out of Hillary Clinton's mouth.
Absolutely.
Clinton,
one last take I just have. I think the main reason Bernie lost is not because I think secondary is a strategy. I completely agree with you that he should have been more forceful. He should have attacked Biden between Nevada and South Carolina. He didn't do that. He should have done that. He did. Those were strategic mistakes. But even if he was more forceful throughout the campaign, I still think that Amy and Pete getting out, endorsing Biden, and Warren staying in, that was just too much to overcome. I think he was not going to win because of that.
That's difficult, right? And that's the flaw in my logic, right? So when I think I said that the other day, the flaw in my logic is Warren. Like, I kept saying, you can't trust her, I'm screaming.
Right.
And you have people like Cenk Uygur, like, no, Warren is okay in this. And it's like, no, she's not. You have Ryan Grimm, Emma Giglin, who are like, no, Warren is great. She's a friend of the left. And I'm like,
the disappointing thing is I respect these people, and I don't know why they don't see it, or maybe they do see it and they want access to Warren, so they don't want to say their real opinion.
I don't think they see it. They're friends of Warren. Yeah. Like, they've rubbed shoulders with her, they're friends with her, they know her, they interviewed her, they like her. I think it's like if you had a close friend of yours and somebody say, hey, dude, your friend's an asshole, and you're like, what are you talking about? And now, from their standpoint, they've seen him be an asshole to people at the, lunch counters. They've seen him just be a dick to other people in the public. But this is your buddy. That guy's not a dick to you. You don't see it.
I completely agree.
I'm looking at this from the perspective of, she is fucking him over in this race. What are y'all looking at? It's like the very presence in the race is screwing him over. Thanks, man. I appreciate your phone call.
Yeah, absolutely. Jamal, keep up the great work.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Hello, what's the name? And what's the topic? Sanders dropped out today, so that's what we're talking about, but who am I speaking with?
Oh, hey, this is Taylor, and I just wanted to tell you about, Sanders dropping out, and you have some good points, but the only thing is, how do you think Bernie could have convinced the boomers and the silent generation to support him? To me, that was a really big issue.
That is a big issue, right? So, in Iowa, when they were dealing with the Social Security stuff, it started to collapse. I think the problem with Sanders, if you're looking at it, it's a generational thing in the sense that you have kids versus adults, but it's also a racial thing, meaning he doesn't have to get all demographics. Sanders just needs to get enough to get over the hump. And like I said, the flaw in my logic is Super Tuesday. What happens from South Carolina if you go into Super Tuesday without that bitter loss? Like, if Sanders doesn't lose by 30 points in South Carolina, I mean, and look, all of this is Monday morning quarterback, right? We're just kind of prognosticating on alternative futures. But what happens if it's not a 30-point loss in South Carolina? What happens if Sanders wins South Carolina? If you win South Carolina, when you go into Super Tuesday, does Warren splitting the vote have as much bang for its buck as it did prior? I mean, like, I don't know how that works. I mean, it's possible that it was fatal either way, meaning Warren being in the race was fatal. My biggest concern with Warren being in the race beforehand was she's going to split the vote. Instead of having a left that is clear and oriented around one person, Warren playing this notion that I'm Bernie Sanders with a vagina with modest changes. That was her entire shtick. Go back and look at the footage of those videos. That was her shtick. I am Bernie Sanders for the most part, but a woman and 10 years younger. That's my shtick. That's the role I'm going to run with. And my thought was, well, wait a minute. You're undermining Sanders at that point. You're effectively pretending to be him. If you're not for Medicare for all, which you're pretending to be for Medicare for all, but you're not, and you're confusing people in this notion that, oh, she's for the same thing that he is. And you're like, well, no, they're not. There's a difference in those things. The climate change stuff. It's like, no, there's a difference in those things. And you go down the line. But Warren
and foreign policy, that was the big one.
Right. She was intentionally trying to confuse. And so as you go from month to month to month, you end up with a situation where Warren edges out of Sanders because they're like, well, look, if these people are the same, well, that's a woman and she's younger, well, let's just go with her. Like, he never could say anything. That was his fatal flaw. And so he just stood there and watched, and she just went up and up and up. And then she deviated from him on Medicare for all. And when she deviated, the public says, I trust Sanders because if you're going to give Medicare for all, the bill has to go somewhere. Clearly, you're going to raise our payroll taxes. We're going to get that money back on the other end, but clearly, you're going to raise our payroll taxes. You got to pay for it somehow. And Warren, magical thinking, no, I'm not going to raise your payroll taxes because I don't want to say that your taxes are going to go up. The public distrusted her, believed Sanders, and she collapsed. Because the moment that you find that the person is lying to you about this big policy agenda like that, you start asking questions about climate change and these other policies that she's talking about. How can I believe you on this stuff if I can't believe you on this? And so she collapses, not for anything that Sanders did, but because of what she did. Warren, right, as she starts to go down, starts to attack Sanders in this process. And I'm like, wait a minute. Not only is she undermining him in regards to policies and subverting him and splitting the vote on the left, even though she doesn't represent these policies in the same way, she is now on her way down, actively attacking him and his supporters in the exact same way that the other Democrats are. My thought is Warren is a creature of the party. And because Warren is a creature of the party, she would most likely, just like in 2016, I can show you the articles where it says Warren was going to get political concessions for backing Clinton. Why would it be any different in 2020? Especially when the way she ran the race, she was for a public option. She should have just said so, not Medicare for all. That's kind of my point. Right. The money that she put it into the election, it wasn't grassroots funded. She didn't ideologically believe it. She did it just because she wanted to stay in one-to-one with Sanders. That's my point. She ran the race in a dishonest way in order to be a one-to-one with Sanders, in order to undermine him. So then she gets to Super Tuesday, stays in the race, uses a super PAC. And think about what that means. All of those people that gave Elizabeth Warren money, going all the way back from the first part in that race, why did they do it? We believe she's similar to Sanders. I'm not taking super PAC money. I'm not taking dark money. Yes, I took it before. Yes, I will take it after. But God damn it, right now, in this very specific moment, I'm not taking it. And those people said, yes, she's not taking super PAC money. She's just like Sanders. She's a female. She's a win. And then it gets to Super Tuesday, and Warren has the indignity of taking a super PAC, $14 million, in order to stay into the race just to split the vote. Just to split the vote to stop Sanders. The person who's grifting money and votes stops the guy who the left chooses and then gets out the race immediately after because her work was done. And they're telling me, no, really, she really is for the left. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Don't tell me she's for the left. I'm sorry. I'm ranting.
Yeah, the DNC just used her as a leech to, get on Bernie.
It's astonishing. I mean, but that was my point, right? That it was necessary that Warren was in the race. My argument was it was fully understandable that Sanders was going to run. And being understandable that Sanders was going to run, if you're part of the DNC, you realize we need to split the vote. We need to split the vote in a way that allows Biden to get over. That's not even like long-term political thinking. That's not even four-dimensional chess. That's just straightforward in regards to if he's going to run, how do we stop him? Hillary Clinton had a hard time doing it. How do we stop him? Warren is similar to Sanders. Whether Warren gets into the race because she's nudged, whether Warren gets into the race because she's a useful idiot, or whether Warren gets into the race just because she's into the race, Hillary Clinton is going to back her because that's the person who cuts into the vote of Sanders. If Warren really did want big structural change, she would have gotten out of the race. And, you know, to make it that much more plain, Warren, and I'll let you go. Thanks, man. I appreciate your call.
Yeah. And
Warren, to make it more plain, after running a race where she pretends to be Sanders, she gets out the race and she attacks Sanders. Money, votes, all of those people that backed her, believing that she was effectively just Sanders, but a woman. She trashed them. Hello, who's calling? What's going on?
Hey, how's it going? This is DJ.
What's going on, DJ? What's the topic?
I just wanted to call in and say that I have no qualms. There was a caller who said that Bernie Sanders, it was kind of like he wanted to promote his ideologies. I have no qualms with Sanders using his platform to propagate his ideologies. I think that his last two runs had affected a meaningful change. And also, the response by the Democratic Party, it illuminated a lot of shortcomings with the system that touts how free we are as a nation. I think that what we learned is that our democracy consists of choices that are carefully constructed to further the interests of a plutocracy as opposed to the American proletariat. And I'm disappointed, with the way things turned out, but I'm not broken. And the reason is because I made a concerted effort to attach myself to the ideology as opposed to the man. And in doing this, it's kind of like when Bruce Wayne passed the mantle over to Terry McGinnis, so to speak. So the show kept moving for me. The only distinguishing factor between that analogy and reality is that there's no Terry McGinnis. And, I'd just like to close by saying to keep your head up. And I really want to thank you because you're really like a sword in a battle of narratives. And, that's the only thing we have. It's a culture war and you're like an armory. Not just you, there's other people like you that equip people with information and create these avenues for communication.
Thanks,
because
man.
That's what it is.
I appreciate that.
A battle. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
I mean, and you know what? Thanks, man. I appreciate the call. It really is a battle of narratives, right? That's all you got. Like, when, I'm trying to think of an example. It's basically Sanders supporters are unruly. Is it true? No, it doesn't have to be true. They're just making it as a narrative to attack the individual. Hello, who's calling? What's your name?
Jeff.
What's going on, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm actually Gaff29. That super chat wasn't meant to you. It was meant to the chat room.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
That comment.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Because
no, but
Bernie,
make your point. I want you to
about
make your point.
Bernie is about the policy.
Yeah, no, make your point because you were going after the chat. So make your point. What's going on? What's on your chest?
People are like surprised on the way he reacted. Bernie's about the chat. I mean, not the chat. Bernie's about the policies only. It's not winning wasn't as important as the policy. I know he wanted to win. I hope he wanted to win. I'm a boomer. I'm out in California.
Wait. You're in a political contest, and you're running for president of the United States. And I agree with you. I want Bernie Sanders to promote his policies. God knows I do. But the catch is, promoting his policies in this particular case was the way he was trying to win. And he won the policy argument. Like in spades, if you go from place to place and you ask those people, which person do you want? Like which policies? They would say Sanders.
Yeah, I understand all that.
Yeah, he totally won that. But
I understand that, and I know he got screwed by the DNC and by
I guess my point is,
media and everything.
But you would agree with me, arguments aren't always won by the person with the facts. Like, you and I can get into an argument, I could be completely wrong, and people come out like, wow, Jamal kicked his ass. Because it comes across sometimes just as a manner, the way the things that people say, maybe a quirk in the language, maybe even just a stylistic thing. And so it's not enough for Sanders to make just an argument and give policy. This debates and these contests are won by things that go well beyond just policy. And unfortunately for Sanders, and I think the thing that irks people in this at least for me, it feels like it's an incomplete primary because the candidate wasn't willing to go beyond just the notion of spewing policy. Is that fair? I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it.
Well, you just to give you an idea. I'm a boomer. I get Social Security. I gave them over $1,000 of my Social Security. Yeah. I volunteered for hundreds of hours for them. I knocked on over 2,000 doors. I phone banked. I did all that. So I was very invested in Bernie winning. And I'm more disappointed than I don't know. My wife's trying to console me, but I'm not that happy about it. And I want him to fight. I told him, I kept on sending him Twitter. I'm not very good on Twitter, but I kept on sending him messages on Twitter saying, "Where's the young man that fought in 1963? Where's that young man, the one that was fighting in the handcuffs?"
Yeah, right. But look, he wouldn't even bring that up. Needed. That's my point. Like you're in a contest of sharks. All of them hate you. Everybody, like if it's me, honestly, I respond to people who don't like me by withdrawing. I don't like to be around people who don't like me. If you don't want to deal with me, if you don't want to talk to me, if we're not on the same wavelength, if you don't want to talk about what I talk about, I am perfectly content with being left to my own devices. I'm an only child.
Yeah, but you're talking about somebody who was used to being hated. He was used to people not liking him.
Right, but that should have emboldened. But that's kind of my point. Shouldn't that embolden you that much more? Meaning, when you are there and you're the sore thumb, you're the person that everybody dislikes in the political space. The media hates you. Everybody hates you. Shouldn't that embolden you that much more? Makes you a little bit more righteously indignant, where you just stand there in your own power, both middle fingers up, and say, "Look, I'm going to do X or I'm going to do Y," and you make that case. And right there, that case that you said, the guy who was dragged away in handcuffs, chained to a black woman, dragged away in handcuffs by the cops. And Joe Biden.
No, it's on. I have the T-shirt of it. And I'm wearing it right now.
Wait. And Joe Biden gets on the debate stage and says, "I was in the civil rights movement." Not just in the civil rights movement. Joe Biden goes from one church, looks a black person in the face, and says, "I marched. We were desegregating movie theaters." Now, your name is Bernie
I'm
Sanders.
old enough to remember when he got caught with his lies in the 80s.
Right. Now, your name is Bernie Sanders. You are head of a multi-generational coalition where you are getting the black vote, the Hispanic vote, the white vote. You're getting it all under the age of 34. And the older African-American generation, South Carolina and these southern states, you're not getting those. You're not getting those to the degree to which you're getting the young vote. The catch is all of them vote more in spades. Now, do you not have a responsibility to all of those African Americans that are backing you that are under the age of 34 to point out just honest history that I was chained to a black woman. I was marching with Martin Luther King. Joe Biden is lying about that, tokenizing that. And I am enraged that he is doing that because it's sacred. And you should not be able to get out there and lie. Joe Biden was caught with his lies in the 80s about the civil rights movement. Now, why am I wrong for saying that you have to say that as a candidate? It is your job. It is almost political malpractice not to say that. Because you need to show.
But does it surprise you that Bernie didn't say anything? I'm serious. I would want him to say it. You'd want him to say it.
Honestly,
does it surprise you that he didn't say anything?
Yes.
He's got that. He's just like honestly, too nice of a person.
Look, I was masterfully naive on this part because to me, I played tournament chess my entire life. To me, you have an objective and you do one thing after the next in order to undermine, subvert, attack. Defend yourself to win the game ultimately.
But look how he treated Hillary.
Well, right, but in Sanders' case,
he treated Hillary the same way. Hillary was a very flawed candidate that he could have attacked easily, and he didn't.
That's true, but there's a difference. In 2016, he ran that race with the thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win it, so he didn't necessarily want to put his hands on her. He didn't think he was going to win that race. He thought he was only going to push her to the left. When he realized that he had the opportunity to win it, well, that was different. In this race, He was coming into this race as a front runner with a clear understanding that he could potentially win. In fact, the Democratic Party understood he could potentially win that race. And so it's a different mindset. And so my thought was, there is no way Sanders is going to fuck this up and not do whatever he needs to do to win this race, because there's so much at stake. 50 years! Like, think back to the last FDR. 50 years! And it's like, you get the opportunity, you're up there, you're on the stage, you're dancing, and the guy says, I can't bring myself to hit the guy in the areas that I need to. Sanders lost the black vote like 75% to 25%. And you think to yourself, where are the areas where Sanders needed to?
Just think how I feel though. I'm too old to. I'm never gonna see another Bernie Sanders type candidate. I'm never gonna see one. I'm too old. You know, it's you might get to see one.
Sad. That's all. It's infinitely sad. Dude, I appreciate the phone call, man. Thank you.
Hey, just one more thing.
Oh, go for it.
About your chat.
Right.
What about your chat? You know, everybody's blaming boomers. I'm a boomer.
I don't blame.
And when I volunteered to canvass for Bernie, it was only boomers out there volunteering. I didn't see any young people doing it.
I don't blame boomers. I don't blame anyone but the candidate.
It's easy for you to sit and chat and blame boomers when you're not willing to go out and do the work.
Look, I don't blame boomers. I don't blame blacks. I don't blame, because look, it's the responsibility of the candidate to be able to get those votes.
Oh, Bernie didn't do anything to earn the black vote. He should have went down. He should have spent so much time in Iowa. He should have spent some time in the South, and let the people try to understand what he's all about. And he didn't do it. He left it over for people like Nina and Killer Mike, and he needs to be there though.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the call.
Okay.
Hello, who's on the line? What's the name?
Hey, it's Andrew.
What's going on? How's it going?
Hey, man. So I wanted to talk in general about how the public has treated Bernie, as in mostly his followers. So I think that we've more or less had double standards about him, because, so I'll give you an example. Let's say we always say we judge politicians by what they do, not what they say.
Right.
We know that Biden talks about everything he does. He worked for this movement or that movement, although he never did.
Right.
So we just go by the facts that you didn't do.
Well, wait.
You're lying about it.
Wait, just so we're clear though, it's not, the double standards aren't, those double standards are intentional. That's a political thing. It's like, think of it as a bias, a favorite. The media likes Joe Biden, so when the media is talking to Joe Biden, even though he's stumbling, even though he's incoherent, even though he can't get his words out, even though it's like he's clearly cognitively challenged, but the media would never bring that up. Like the media would talk to him like a child, and they would gently bring him along. But when they're talking about Sanders, it's an entirely different conversation. If Sanders acted the way that Joe Biden acted, people would be in an uproar. That's intentional.
Yeah, that is certain. I'm not talking from the media's point of view, but let's say as a Bernie follower.
Okay.
When Bernie says that he hates the billionaires and then goes and does unity tours with the billionaires, we never doubt the fact that he's doing the opposite of what he says. We go with what he says. We believe that he hates the billionaires, and obviously there is reason to believe that. But why is it that when Bernie says one thing and does the opposite, nobody holds his feet to the fire? When it comes to, we make fun of Biden's mental abilities, but Bernie literally says that it's an existential crisis, money in politics. Biden is probably the guy most funded by corporate money. And then he calls him a decent guy. So as you say, how do you square that circle? You can't make fun of one's cognitive abilities and later on give a statement as absurd as that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, look, for the last year, I've been saying the same thing. Like, because if you tell me that the life or the fate of the world is at stake, like if I come to your house and I say, dude, the fate of the world is at stake, and you say, really? I say, yes. We're all gonna take it. We're all gonna eat it if we don't do something about our climate. You got me. I don't want if just so happen I end up having a kid, I want the kid to have a world to live in, right? So I need to do something about that. And then you say, I'm the guy for that job. And I say, great. You're going to save the world. And you say, yes. That's a big job. That's a big job. That's a lot of, stuff at stake. And then you tell me, but Joe Biden is my buddy. And so despite the fact that Joe Biden is a representative of all of that, I can't lay a glove on him. And at that point, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? You just told me that the fate of the world is at stake, but your integrity or your ethics don't allow you to take a decision that matches up against that. Like, it just doesn't register.
Yeah, but that's my point. See, Jamal, I don't think it's about integrity and ethics, because think about it. By his own ethics, you would think that he wouldn't like billionaires, he wouldn't hang out with billionaires. So if he is a man of ethics, why does he accept going on campaigning about unity with billionaires? In that case, you would say out of ethics.
Wait, who's
but
the
you
billionaires
wouldn't
that
you
he's hanging
think?
out with?
Well, when he was with Tom Steyer and Bloomberg on stage going around, right? So one would think that.
Come on, that's not fair. They're on the debate stage.
Well, again, it's not like the Hillary Clinton is not a near billionaire. You wouldn't think that a guy like Bernie wouldn't campaign for Hillary Clinton. So my point is, again, if you think if he wasn't attacking Biden out of ethics, then he shouldn't have campaigned for Clinton out of the same ethics. So even there, you see there is a double standard. And again, we don't hold his feet on the fire when he. We rationalize why he doesn't.
I don't think that's fair, but make your point. Make your point.
We rationalize when he doesn't attack Biden, and we bring in his ethics that he's a nice guy. He doesn't want to do this. He wants to take it to higher ground. But then he campaigns for Hillary Clinton, and then we don't bring about, well, what happened to it? What happened to his ethics? Why is he campaigning for Clinton? But again, my point is, so even if we leave this behind, my point is what happened this time is that it shows the great flaws in the system. I don't think this campaign or Bernie's campaign was the main thing to take out of this. I think the fact is that it exposes the system that even if it's Bernie, you cannot put your luggage on one horse and hope that it's going to make it. And I think people have to realize that we can't just hope that another person is going to come, take Bernie's torch and carry it. People need to organize. And my point is, I personally am thinking right now, what can I do within my community to make change, even on a small scale? Because, if people who have outreach, let's say political commentators on YouTube, let's say Jimmy Dore now is trying to organize some kind of union strikes or whatnot. If the people who talk the talk have millions following them, do not start walking the walk, we cannot just hope that someone's going to carry this. Nobody's going to do that. That's been 100 years. In the States, for 100 years, people have been fighting for Medicare for all, let's say, or universal health care.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. And that this is a big problem. We have to realize that we need to start on a small scale, doing what we can do. And even if you don't like running for office, but you have 1 million followers on Instagram, you have to bite it. There is no way. Who's going to run for office? Your neighbor, who's an 80-year-old lady who doesn't go out more than once a week? Who's going to take that job if not you? So there is no other way of doing this.
So I want to respond to just one point. I don't think it's fair to say that it's a breach of ethics for Sanders to run against Clinton. Because the political, and 2 points. Standing on the debate stage with Tom Steyer is not the same thing as hanging out with billionaires. Come on, let's be fair. Let's be fair. He's on the debate stage to debate. They're not just hanging out getting tea or, just hanging in the limo. He is on the debate stage to actually engage in some level of verbal combat. As for the Hillary Clinton stuff, look, I agree with you. I don't necessarily like the fact that Sanders is out there shilling for Hillary Clinton. By the same token, he had already made those entanglements before the election took place. If you consider that to be a breach of ethics, fair enough. I would say that he probably would not consider that to be a breach of ethics. That's more a point of view thing.
But is it a singular case, though, Jamal? Do you think that's a singular case? Because once he was done campaigning for Clinton, he went on a month-long tour with Tom Perez for unity, right? You see? So this idea of ethics not attacking Biden goes one way.
Wait. Why do you think he did that, though?
Well, I'm not. That's not my point. That's the thing. That's not my point. My point is, if we are to bring in.
Wait. But it matters. It's not something you can ignore. If you say that it's a breach of ethics for him to go for Hillary, okay. And then you say it's also a breach of ethics for him to shill for the DNC with Tom Perez. Okay, but you have to answer the question of why is he doing it? Because that makes the determination of whether or not it's a breach of ethics, meaning his reasons matter. It's not so much, you can't just say the act itself is the picture of it. You have to understand why he's doing it. The reason that Sanders was doing that had everything to do with this notion that he was going to reinsole the DNC. By his logic, I am doing this to fundamentally change the DNC. I am going to stay in the limelight, and while I'm staying in the limelight, I'm going to reinsole the Democratic Party with my ideals. Now, you can say he failed. You can say it didn't work. But I don't think you can say it's a breach of his ethics if his entire point of it was to try to get some kind of transformation. You can say he was naive. You can say all those things. But a breach of ethics doesn't necessarily seem to work in that process if his entire point was to get his objectives accomplished. Is that fair?
Well, let's take it this way. If we take your same argument, the argument that you're making right now, we can apply it to Biden, right? And let's say that for what he was trying to accomplish, all he had to do is mop the floor with Biden, put his ethics aside, and we have an excuse why he should put his ethics aside. So see, if the goal can be a reason why you can breach your ethics, how about we apply it to attacking Biden,
right,
breach your ethics, and attack Biden?
Right.
So again, see, this goes one way. This only seems to go one way, and that is my point.
But you don't have to breach your ethics to attack Biden. And that was kind of one of my aggravations with Sanders. Like, if Sanders says, look, I'm not going to lie about a campaign. I'm not going to make stuff up. I'm not going to, just create and fabricate stuff in the way some of these other people do in their campaigns. Fair enough. I agree with him. He shouldn't do it. I don't like campaigns that lie. But if Joe Biden is out there talking about he was part of the civil rights movement again, when he had got caught with it before in the 80s, it behooves you to say that. Now, Sanders doesn't say it, though, not because it breaches his ethics, because if it was Hillary Clinton, he may do that video. No, he doesn't say it because he's buddies with Biden. Based on the BuzzFeed article, the New York Times article, that's my buddy. I don't want to necessarily go after my buddy like that, so I'm not going to do it. Like, that's fucking maddening. But that's his reasoning for doing that. When he was shilling and running with the DNC and Tom Perez, that had everything to do with staying in the limelight because he was going to run again in 2020. Those are just the politics of trying to stay vocal, open, alive, part of the DNC, all this other stuff. But his entire point was, I am trying to reinsole the Democratic Party with my policy ideas, Medicare for all, getting rid of student debt, etc. And you can't say that he wasn't successful. The hegemonic norm shifted. The majority of the population agreed with his ideas. So, you can't say that what he was trying to do wasn't accomplished. He did, to some degree, accomplish that in the policy sense. The issue is he lost. And the issue is that he lost because he wasn't willing to go there with Biden because he was friends with Biden. And yeah, there were ideological guardrails. I guess I don't like the idea of saying he breached his ethics in doing something when he did accomplish his objectives to some degree, even though he didn't necessarily win the presidency. It just seems harsh, that's all. It seems like it doesn't necessarily entirely apply. It's a cynical view of what took place that I don't necessarily think works.
Yeah, well, I see your point. But again, I mean, the point now, my general idea wasn't necessarily to talk about Bernie and to trash him at this point. The idea initially, my starting point was that we aren't holding necessarily Bernie to the same standards that we would hold any other politicians. And sometimes we give him a pass when we shouldn't. And I think partly his loss is also our fault. Although I agree with you, it's the candidate's fault when it comes. 99% of it is the candidate's fault. But we, as his followers, let's say, did not hold his feet on fire to the fire when he pretty much did this whole doublespeak thing himself, went with the Russiagate thing, this and that. People said, no, he's just doing it for this reason, that reason. Let's close our eyes. Let's not look at it because he takes the ideas we want to this and that. But in the end, this came to bite us all. And yes, if we, from the beginning, didn't allow him to take this stupid step, he wouldn't have near attendance staff working for him. But this is a slow process, and they ingeniously, the way Boris Johnson did, took over his campaign, destroyed the whole thing, and now they're done with it. And now they're disposing the carcass.
You know what? You make a really interesting point, and we can end it on this part. But this notion of responsibility of supporters, like when you see your candidate doing something, you're like, God, that doesn't work, or he's royally fucking up, and it's in mass known, meaning it's like all of his supporters understood that very basic point that Sanders doesn't have a killer instinct. And yet we watched him go month to month to month. And then you see him, and I think part of the problem was, it's like, well, he's in number one place, he's doing really well, and so you kind of leave him to his own devices, even though you know it's like, can you win a campaign that way? And then he deflates and falls apart. And then you're stuck with the thought of, shit, man, what's the responsibility of the supporters in trying to get across, like, dude, this doesn't work. Like, I suppose, like, going forward, do supporters be a little bit more antsy about candidates that don't have the ability to go after their political opponent? And is it, like, what level of responsibility? Like, all of these questions kind of fall out of this campaign. This is what I mean when I say this campaign to me is complicated. Dude, thank you for calling into the show. I really appreciate your call.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one. All right, let's get to some super chats. So, Anthony Allen, keep up the good work. Love your show. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Mokissimo, why not criticize Trump and conservatives as much as Democrats? Trump is playing to the base, not to some mythical pro-peace group of conservatives. All right, so let me explain why I tend to focus more on Democrats. I have plenty of shows where I go after Trump. And I have been deriding Trump relentlessly over what he's been doing in regards to the coronavirus crisis and how his malfeasance, his incompetence has effectively caused deaths en masse, hundreds of thousands of people infected. We are the epicenter of this virus at this point. All of that is at Trump's front door. Don't let him put that on China or anybody else. I've been screaming to high heaven about that for months. I focus on Democrats, though. You're right, more so. Because if anything is going to get done in this country, it's going to get done from the left. And fact of the matter is, it's the Democratic Party that screams and howls about wanting health care and all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, when it came down to it, and there was the guy who was going to push for those policies that people believed the Democratic Party stood for anyway, what did they do? They lined up in mass, in order to stop him from doing that, including Elizabeth Warren. If anything real is to get accomplished, you need a Democratic Party that is functional, that reacts to the pain and the anguish of the poor and the middle class, which is its philosophical responsibility. The catch here is that oligarchs have invaded the Democratic Party every bit as much as the Republican Party. But the Democratic Party is the party that screams that it cares about the needs of the poor and the middle class. I'm making the point that, yes, I focus more so on Democrats because that's the party that earned that level of ire and that level of scrutiny based on what they consider and what they call themselves. That's why I focus more so on Democrats. And again, if anything is going to get accomplished, it has to get accomplished, if it's going to get accomplished through a party structure, through one that's receptive. The overwhelming majority of the public is saying, yes, we want Medicare for all. Democratic Party says, nope. Overwhelming majority of the public agrees, yes, let's get rid of student debt. Democratic Party, nope. Like, meaning from one policy position after the next that the public wants, the Democratic Party says, no, we're not doing that. We're in the pocket of oligarchs. We're not going to do it. We don't have to do it. There's no pressure on us to do it because ideologically we don't care about that stuff anyway. We're in this office because you have had no political accountability on us, and so we don't have to do squat. You give us no standards, so we don't have to do anything. And the left scratches its head wondering why I can never get anything done. Yes, I go after the Democratic Party because between the two, that is the one that is supposed to be doing stuff to ameliorate the issues of poverty in the country. And after seeing that all of these policy positions are popular, they still turn away and are like, nope, that's okay, we don't want to touch that. Yeah, they deserve my ire every bit as much as the Republican Party. Gaff29, Jamal, I was talking to your chat. My bad. Fair enough. Aisha's Best Life, turned down the ringtone a bit. Yeah, I have to get that. What happened to the DNC fraud lawsuit, Darren Levy? I'm not sure. Something about, if I'm not mistaken, the last thing I heard about that, it was filed within the Supreme Court. That was the last I heard. It was something on Twitter about it. Philip Church, could the phone ringing sound not be so loud? So I don't know how to control the sound of the ring. Maybe I can cut it down this way. All right, maybe that works. I'm sorry. And the last one. What's the odds DNC replace Biden with Hillary? Oh, man. They've been lusting over Cuomo. Have you been seeing that? They've been lusting over Cuomo like nobody's business. They've been wanting them some Cuomo, to rub themselves in some Cuomo. I have no idea. I honestly don't know. I don't know how that works. I mean, the problem is the moment that you replace Biden, anybody who's voting for Sanders says, whoa, how does that work? And the question becomes, you have 15% of Sanders supporters that said they're voting for Trump. A segment of the Sanders supporters aren't going to vote for Joe Biden at all, me being one of them. And now you have a situation where you replace Biden and you don't replace him with Sanders, who came in number 2, who was picking up delegates. You replace him with some random asshole who nobody voted for, that you may be okay with. But what are Bernie voters going to do? Is that going to increase the number of people that decide that they're not voting for that person because that person didn't run into elections in order to get their support and Sanders was the number 2 person? Like, it creates certain problems when you separate and replace Biden. Ultimately, I think they're stuck with Biden, especially if they want to get whatever the percentage of Bernie voters they're going to get. I have a hard time believing that works. Like, I really don't know the mechanics of making that work where they choose Clinton or Cuomo or anybody else in that spot. But maybe. Who knows? I would not put it past them, I suppose, but that would be difficult to conceive of. All right. I'm going to end this. I am starting to drag ass. This ends up being a patron appreciation episode. But I wanted to talk to the audience because, you know, we joke and laugh at the Kamala Harris group when she faded out top tier candidate Kamala Harris. We laughed at the Buttigieg campaign when it flamed out. And I guess my feeling is, you know, I'm going to have to work through some complicated feelings for the 2020 election, specifically Bernie Sanders. What went wrong, why it went wrong. I've given some of that here in this video. What, you know, my thinking on Sanders, people talking about the African-American vote and all this other stuff and why he couldn't necessarily get it. I think my analysis is right. I think my analysis has been right all the way through this. It's not, you know, at some point my biases are going to lead me astray. But in this particular case, it just feels like missed opportunity. That's what it is. That's what it is. That's what it is. That's what it is. Missed opportunity. Where you find yourself having something that you haven't had access to for like 40, 50, 60 years. You have the opportunity, you have everything betting on this particular opportunity, and the opportunity is just outright missed. And then you find out that the reason that the opportunity was missed because the guy was jerking off in the back room when he was supposed to be out there taking a shot on the baseball field. It's like, what? What were you doing? Didn't you know that, you know, the stadium was set? You had millions of people watching, and it was just out there for you to kind of go out there and hit the ball, just do the thing that you do, and he couldn't do it. It's time to dance. Couldn't find his legs. Like, share, subscribe. Yes, it's a dark day. Thanks all.